Hello and welcome to this, the latest instalment in Whippersnapper's series of interviews with policymakers, movers and shakers and promise breakers. My name's Adrian Burbie and today I'm joined by David Burrowes, Conservative MP for Enfield Southgate. Mr Burrowes, good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks for that introduction with the singing the tale about promise breakers. I hope it won't be wholly cynical. I hope
you're not one of those.
Speaking to a younger interviewer, that you won't just follow some of the cynicism of the older media.
I definitely won't.
Okay.
Mr Burrowes, you're a prominent Conservative Christian. You were the parliamentary chairman of the Conservative Christian Fellowship, which you founded with Times columnist Tim Montgomery.
That's right.
Yesterday, the Church of England published an open letter which asked for a fresh moral vision in politics and which tacitly criticised the Conservatives' welfare reforms. Do you think the Church should keep its trap shut when it comes to politics?
No. I mean, the Church is part of the community, the wider polis, which is the life of the city, and that includes Christians and churches, and also obviously the Church of England is established, part of the state architecture, and so yes, it has a voice, and yes, it should be entitled to write to its parishioners and say, look, get engaged in politics, ask those deep questions, ensure that our politicians have a moral vision, and that the gap which they were trying to seek to look at, which can be seen between the politicians and the people, and the disinterest and distrust that's around, not least your early introduction, and they're trying to bridge that and say that, look, you know, what are the politicians about? What are they motivated for? I mean, if you read the whole of that, and things the media picked up on bits of it, yes, there was parts of it which I don't agree with. I think some of what they were saying was partial and wasn't what they were trying to sort out. Is trying to make sure that politicians care about the common good, care about about being there not for themselves but for others and for the common good, that they work together on issues of national importance and that they show proper compassion and all that. But what went beyond that and was a concern, and I thought actually let them down as a church, is that they then started to get involved in giving a critique of welfare. They started talking about Trident and the relationship with Europe, things which Christians, myself and one, will disagree about. I will wholeheartedly agree with other Christians from other political parties about wanting together to pursue the common good, but we were different ways of achieving that. And I see, for example, welfare as a clear area where it is for the common good, that it, as is now being established, it pays to work, with record numbers in work, that the church should be loud about that, that they're only talking about what is a real concern and a real issue, which is how the vulnerable are coping with the cuts to welfare. And we're all concerned about that. We want to make sure that those who really need the support get that.
A lot of what the Church has been saying in the past few years all seems very anti-conservative, quite almost, if you look at it on a political scale, almost quite centre-left. Do you think the two are becoming incompatible with each other?
Well, look, you mentioned the Conservative Christian Fellowship, which I established with Tim Montgomery 25 years ago, and at university. In fact, I was just back at the university just yesterday with my son having a look around. It was to brought back old memories, but one of those old memories was that it came on the back of the church being very, very critical of the then Conservative government, and perhaps it goes with the territory that the church is critical of government. Particularly, it's interesting to see Conservative government. So I think there's a tendency, particularly with one or two within the church leadership, to have perhaps more of a tendency towards, you talk about centre-left, give different labels, but I don't want to go against it. The church need to be out there, and they need to be an uncomfortable presence for all us politicians. It may not be comfortable, the church, and they're there to sort of have a sort of prophetic call to go beyond the here and now of current issues that dominate politics into more of a long-term view and a concern for the nation, and that's something which they can carry on doing.
A survey came out this morning saying that up to 40% of Tory Christians were planning to switch their vote at the next election, possibly as a result of the gay marriage bill. What do you make of this?
I don't know. I think the main poll is the one on May the 7th, and we can come up with different polls. There's often different agendas behind those questions to try and recruit people into different issues, campaigns, organisations. So I'm cautious about that. I mean, I have to recognise, not least because I was one of the leading opponents of the redefinition of marriage, that it had a big impact, not least on Christians and on those from all political persuasions. And they hold the Conservative Party most to account, because it is the Conservative Party which has traditionally and still is the party of the family, the party that stands up for marriage, the party that has introduced the marriage tax allowance, that does repeatedly stand up for Christian values. And so there is a higher burden often on the Conservative Party, even though 2/3 of the Conservative Parliamentary Party did not support the Same-Sex Marriage Act.
Are you annoyed that the bill got through and that you weren't listened to?
I'm in a democratic institution, and it's based on numbers and votes, and we didn't get enough votes to defeat the bill. So I'm not annoyed. I suppose the only frustration is that the way it was dealt with in terms of the timescale, and it wasn't a clear manifesto commitment. It was something which was dealt with in a way that I think could have had more consultation and more scrutiny, and so that is the frustration.
So you don't feel there's a mandate for it?
So I didn't think there was a mandate. There is now within Parliament, because Parliament has approved it, a mandate from Parliament. But I felt from the wider public that there wasn't a clear involvement and engagement, not least a general election with a manifesto.
Do you think we should have bishops in the House of Lords?
Yeah.
Why? What role do you think they should play in a modern democracy?
Well, I mean, I think there's different parts of that question, because our democracy is a British democracy. It's different from everyone else. Others don't have bishops in their parliament. It's unique. It's based around the established church. So if you don't want bishops in the House of Lords, you need to also look at the issue of the establishment of the Church of England. You can't, I don't think, just simply try and shoehorn them out of it on the back of reforming the House of Lords. I think the House of Lords needs reform, needs to be modernised. It's not wholly fit for purpose in a modern day democracy, and that's because we have some excellent peers, maybe 100, 200, who really work hard, do great scrutiny, hold the government to account, have independence, have expertise, all the things the public I think want, but it hasn't got the element of public accountability, not least through an elected or properly independent appointed process that doesn't have party patronage so much, that isn't based about people being there for life because they're good celebrity people or good this and that. And the reality is that there's not enough peers who are able to take an active role for, I think, it to be fit for current purpose. So I supported reform, and I think that's something that still needs to be sorted out.
You voted strongly for the introduction of elected police and crime commissioners.
Yeah.
And it's quite clear that with only 15% of the public turning out to vote, the people aren't overly enthusiastic about this. Do you think elected PCCs was a mistake?
No, I mean, I think the principle was a sound one. I think holding the leadership of the police to account, a much more accountable structure through a leadership, ultimately through an election, is a good and sound principle. My own view actually was that there needs to be both a policing and justice element to a commissioner, that there's a wider remit, that it works in London. We have Boris, who has a clear leadership and accountability, and is someone to go to in relation to ultimately issues of policing. So in some ways I think the role could be expanded to give it much more resonance, to affect both policing and also justice, with respect on what's going on in, for example, local prisons and what's happening in our local justice system, to give people confidence. So I think that happened. I have to say, yeah, I mean, it's disappointing that so few people have turned out, and we need to be alive to reviewing that and seeing and understanding why that's happening, and making sure that there is better engagement. So there's certainly great room for improvement. I wouldn't throw out the principle, the baby with the bathwater.
Do you think the Conservative Party has a young person problem?
I think every politician would have to say there is a young person problem, in the sense that there's not enough young people engaged. You've got to look at the last voting figures for for young people, 18 to 20s, was too low. You're about to come
but
back.
why does Labour have a 15% lead when it comes to 17 to 20-year-olds? That's quite a big...
And I was about to say, I'm not complacent. I think that there are issues of connection with Conservatives, and I think there's a perception that we are older, and that there's that perception of us being on the side of the rich rather than the poor, which is wrong and is not true, actually. And I mean, I have to just go back to, suppose, what inspired me to get involved as a young person around your age, actually, is the issue of character and leadership of those politicians around. And rather than we're going to do this for young people, we're going to help sort out this young person issue, we're going to sort out voting age for young people, all that, I think that young people's package is somewhat patronising and tokenistic. What we need to show, and it goes back a little bit to your earlier question about the church and the issue of vision, we need to show a vision that captures the aspirations, imaginations, and motivations of young people. Young people are not short of getting involved in issues, often single issues particularly, but we need to show that our mind, our heart, and that's where the church would say our soul is something which is aligned with young people's aspirations as well. And I think the way that we have to do that is, not least individual members upon, is be out there connecting as much as we can with young people, showing that we care about the same issues, and want to make the world a better place, which includes very much what younger people want to do as well. So yeah, I think the one way to answer that, the best way, is in terms of young people being involved in politics, and certainly that's what we're doing here locally much more. And we've got to find ways that young people see that being part of the Conservative Party is very much a natural place to be.
Last week we interviewed Oliver Dowden, who was David Cameron's former Deputy Chief of Staff, and he said that the reason was that there is an inherent incompatibility between the ideologies of the Conservative Party and young people. Do you think that's true?
It's an interesting remark. I'd have to read the transcript just to check that one out. But no, I mean, the ideology is one of freedom and responsibility, and when you look at just those two principles, I could go on to others as well, of a compassion for the poor, of passion, concern for the vulnerable, of supporting families and local associations and groups, of civic society. All that are things which young people are naturally involved in. They want to, I think, increase. They don't want to have this big overarching state that's going to tell us what to do and control everything we do. They want that freedom, and they also want it aligned with responsibility of being concerned for our neighbour and those around us. And those are things that are young people's principles. That's an ideology which isn't in any way inherently incompatible. So I'd have to have a word with Oliver. I don't know where he's coming from on that one.
Ed Miliband has pledged to cut tuition fees to £6,000, and this is going to be a real vote winner with young people. How's the Conservative Party going to respond to that?
I suppose, as you say, it'd be a vote winner. I think we need to take the issue of student finance seriously, as well as students, young people, seriously. I think we can't just sort of throw out a little bauble here to say, please grab it. And some people may say it's an election bribe, but we need to take things seriously. And I think any student wants to obviously not pay as much, obviously, when they go to university. I know my twins who are going up to university age, the cost of accommodation that they're going to face, not least despite regardless of the tuition fees. But also they want to go to a university that is viable, that is actually getting in fantastic research, that is competitive in what is a global market, that helps ensure that they're going to get a job at the end of it all. And all that takes proper finance, not just student finance, but also the university to be able to financially withstand increasingly competitive world. And I just don't think it stacks up financially. And I think the big question for students, as well as any age, is really, is that a policy of a government that's serious in government, that's going to be able to seriously deal with the continual challenges we have for the economy, to run the economy, so that we can support universities as much as we do. There's a balance between the students paying and obviously the taxpayer funding. But I think the balance is where it's right at the moment, because there's lots of people that don't go to university. Increasingly, there's those that may well choose a vocational route, apprenticeships that should have as high value as possible, or just go straight into work. And now, those taxpayers are subsidising also students to go to university to end up with, on average, a higher salary at the end. And they themselves will be looking, well, hang on, why should they not pay that amount? Sure, yes, we shouldn't put any student off going to university. It should not be an upfront fee. It should, as it is, pay when you earn that average wage. We should be still looking to make sure we have a proper grant and sponsorship and support for those students from well-off from the least well-off backgrounds that will not actually prevent them, particularly on the living costs, from being an obstacle to going into university. But I think that's not taking students or the issue of universities seriously enough.
In 2010, only 51.8% of 18 to 24-year-olds turned out to vote.
Yeah.
What do you suggest we do to increase youth voter engagement?
I mean, it goes back to some of the early points I mentioned. I don't think there's just a package of youth policies that will do it. We need to learn a little bit from, well, probably a lot from Scotland, in the sense of not just the voting age, but the issue of what really got them out there to vote.
So would you be in favour of votes at 16?
No, not presently. I don't think that's the answer, actually. I think that's a simplistic answer, because there's still a disengagement, even if the vote's there. And you need to get beneath the right to vote to why people voted. And why people voted in Scotland, they saw it really made a difference to them. They felt very much part of the debate, and that's an issue of engaging, and this helps, this kind of debate, this kind of conversation. But other ways to just engage and see that actually, for me, it really matters, me being involved. It matters. And I think it's trying to establish earlier on at school and in other areas, ways that, yes, it matters to me to be part of this citizenship, and beyond the citizenship lessons that happen at the moment, but I think it's increasing actually. The schools I go to, there's a growing awareness and appreciation of I have a role in society, I have a voice, and one of the crucial ways that I can exercise that voice is through the ballot box.
Would you be in favour of some of the proposals we've heard of mandatory voter registration in secondary schools, or mandatory voting for first-time voters? Do you think
where I'm coming more in turn is the issue of compulsory voting, and I increasingly think that at the very least every citizen should do is vote. Now, my ideal is that people vote voluntarily. They see it as their duty, their civic duty to do so. But I think it is such a prerequisite for citizenship that everyone should do it.
Do you think,
and that will obviously increase turnout.
Do you think the citizenship education in secondary schools, PSHE as it's called, needs an overhaul?
I think we need to have, within the inspection regime, there needs to drill down deeply into the good and the bad and the ugly in a way. And I think where I've been around the schools here locally, I go, for example, to Winchmore School. I go through all the years, do a citizenship class with a whole year group, going through what it means to be a politician, what it's like. And I go through the year group all the way through, and that's based around the leadership of the teachers. So it's often the quality, the way the teachers get it. Other schools, Highlands and Enfield, are also very much on that training in Southgate recently as well. So I think it's probably too much down to the individual teacher's passion, because there's so many other competing priorities on the curriculum. So we need to find a way, and the best way often these days, as Rudolph says, to make sure there's a bit of a marker that goes down to see this as an important part of this British values issue, actually. This whole issue of engaging democracy, the freedoms that we have. You know, we're remembering Magna Carta, the first English Parliament, all of that. It's a great year, isn't it, to see a really crucial way of doing this is ensuring that we have high quality citizenship classes.
What's your opinion on unpaid internships and the living wage? This is a key issue for many young people who are stuck in low-paid jobs at the moment.
Yeah, I support the London living wage. I think that should primarily be done through good practice, good example. not least through the big corporations. It makes sense as a matter of principle and fairness, but also economic sense, and it's good for the taxpayer as well, that people are earning a decent wage, and it's with all the cost of living challenges in London, it makes sense. So we can lead by example, and that's the way that Boris has done, particularly for many years before Labour and others got onto this issue. He was showing as a mayor that by everything that he procures and involved in, that the London living wage should be the established norm, and is encouraging other companies to do so. I think government has done okay. It's been quite late to the table, but encouraging all their contracts, which have asked, to be on a London living wage basis, and that also sets out a really good precedent. Now, some departments do better than others at doing that. I've been involved in trying to encourage that along. Now, interestingly, it's young people, the Citizens UK and others, who've been really been very much part and parcel of that movement, and that's young people really engaging, making a difference, and seeing that come into affecting lives. That's very important. On the issue of unpaid interns, I think yes, we've got to be careful of and there's a leadership that comes from members of Parliament and others, because lots of people wanting interns. I think there's a role for shorter term work experience type things, which aren't necessarily paid, to give people an opportunity to gain an insight, but we do need to ensure that interns aren't abused or exploited and used as so-called cheap labour, that they are paid properly as well.
What about 0 hours contracts? Ed Miliband says he wants to ban. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think there's zero contracts are something which should be discouraged. I don't see the need to have an outright statutory ban of them. There is a place in a limited way for some flexibility for zero contracts. It does enable particularly young people actually just an opportunity in different ways, but I think there's other parts of the employment law that can provide adequate protection to avoid exploitation. So I think there's a flexibility, but it's certainly, and what we've seen, and is the case, is that the new employment that's coming, the record employment figures, that they are increasingly coming with full-time jobs that are not zero contracts, and the sort of suggestion that that's the kind of new employment is not true. I think one can over-amplify the scale of zero contracts. I think it has a limited role, and I think it's the good example of good practice from employers to make sure that the norm is obviously paid properly by a living wage.
Do you think the current state of PMQs is acceptable?
No.
Do you partake in all this childish jeering, booing and heckling?
I don't know as a rule, though. I imagine if you pan the camera, there may be the odd time when I joined in a cheer or a laugh or whatever, and you do get wrapped up in the whole atmosphere of it. It becomes quite tribal. But I think that we must do things better.
How?
And my view is radical. Is that we still have Prime Minister's questions time. It's something which other countries want to adopt. Aung San Suu Kyi, for example, who I've been met recently and followed and support obviously all the pro-democracy movement there. When she came to this country, said, if only we could have a Prime Minister's question in Burma. So there's a role for that scrutiny, that high-level scrutiny, challenging the Prime Minister today. I think though, because we have it in an adversarial chamber, and the way it is constructed, it develops into this. However much the Prime Minister says, I'm going to stop this. So I think the way to do that is, so I would go for one option of breaking the cultural mould is to have Prime Minister's questions in a large grand committee room, and then the scrutiny takes place with however many MPs can get into that room. Say 100, then the next 100 do next week, the next 100 do that week. So MPs have a fair crack at scrutinising the Prime Minister, and in that different room, and obviously committee rooms, you'll know that select committees are done in a much different way. They have a whole different genre, and I think they hold Parliament in a good standing, because they're really cross-party from scrutinising the executive, and this will create that kind of approach, I think, to the Prime Minister.
Do you think that the current state of PMQs puts people off politics?
It puts off some people, and even those who are then MPs get sick of it. It's quite male dominated. It's a male culture, so it's, there's kind of a public school clubby type element to it that is generated, so it can put people off. It's interesting, some people just, the only thing they'll watch those Prime Minister's questions is the theatre.
Yeah.
So I think it has its place and people like to watch it. The one thing people want to go to watch is Prime Minister's questions. The problem is, I think, is that that dominates everyone's view of what Parliament is like, when most of the time we're doing lots of other things in lots of other ways, much more healthily and productively.
What do you do with a problem like UKIP?
You recognise that the issues that UKIP supporters have are real issues, the issues of Europe and immigration, the issue of the wider issue of a disdain and distrust of established politics is something which needs to be grasped. So deal with the issues head on, squarely, clearly, making clear promises, keeping to those promises, and relentlessly focus on the issues that matter to them as well, which is, ensuring that a long-term economic plan is we keep on that, so that we've got a strong economy to support our public services, and ensure that we also have a strong Prime Minister, because at the end of the day, I think for UKIP supporters, everyone else, they need to make the decision about who they want in number 10. The chaos of Miliband, or the competence and strong leadership of the Prime Minister, which will lead to us being able to then have, only with the Prime Minister, a referendum on Europe, to be able to decide about issues, not least freedom of movement, and whether we can probably control our borders within or without Europe, but either way have a say on Europe, and that's something UKIP supporters care about.